My name is Nancy Fulton. I currently run events for about 40,000 entertainment industry pros, writers, screenwriters, producers, actors, people that work below the line, crew, DPs, a whole bunch of folks that work in the entertainment industry or work to create media in all of its forms, whether it's written or performed, podcasts, etc. If you have any questions about my work, check out nancyfultonmeetups.com. You'll find all the information you could possibly want to know. You can also email me at nancy@nancyfultonmeetups.com. And today, we're going to be doing an event that talks about writing, publishing, and selling graphic novels or comic books. And we have a guest speaker today whose name is Anthony Sturmas. And he's a professional illustrator as well as a storyboard artist, which makes him kind of perfect for the people that I support, because he has a background not just in creating illustrations or graphic art, but in creating the kind of images that filmmakers need whenever they're producing on set. And one of the reasons I think people should produce graphic novels is because if you're a filmmaker or a screenwriter and you want to make sure that your work is presented to audiences and to investors and producers, if you're a screenwriter, if you want to make it so that the work looks the most cinematic it possibly can, creating a graphic novel is the best way to do that. But it's important that the graphic novel convey what things actually look like, rather than make something that looks allegorical.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna, with your permission, Anthony, is it okay if I just go ahead and quickly go through what's in the
Yeah, absolutely.
novel? And then we'll just go ahead and talk for a few minutes? Cool.
Yep.
So, and I want to point out that all of the black and white images that you see as we move through this work were actually created by Anthony Stramas. We've collaborated to pitch multiple graphic novels, and we're actually working together to produce one as a team. So with that in mind, the first thing in the workbook that you've got is going to talk about why writers should consider writing and releasing graphic novels. First of all, if it's something that you've always wanted to do, it's a good reason to do it. Second of all, if you have an interest in turning your novel into something that gets produced, a graphic novel is closer to getting produced, is more desirable in a lot of ways than a standard novel, because it's already kind of storyboarded out. If you go ahead and check out donedealpro.com, you can see there's a whole bunch of people that sell graphic novels. If you can develop a following for your graphic novel, making a movie will be 1,000 times easier. Producers should consider producing, publishing, and promoting their graphic novels because first, it creates the storyboards for the film, which makes your film easier to fund and easier to sell. Second of all, promoting the graphic novel before the film helps you find an audience for the film when it becomes available. And if you license the film for distribution or sell it to a distributor, if the movie does well, it means that your book is also going to do well. And chances are that you will earn more per copy of the book than you ever do for each download of the movie or each viewing of the movie or each ticket sold. So books are kind of a better investment than films. And if you take a look at some of the biggest studios, you'll notice that if you think about Disney and Warner Brothers and all those guys, I'm pretty sure that their movies are really just advertisements for their merchandise. And the biggest and most important merchandise is actually books. Coloring books, everything from coloring books to graphic novels to novelizations to just a million different kinds of books. It's the favorite product to merchandise in. So that's a good reason for producers there are several good reasons for producers to create graphic novels. Screenwriters should consider releasing their unsold works as graphic novels for a variety of reasons. The first is that in January of 2018, LA Times declared the spec script dead. That means if you write a spec screenplay, it's going to be almost impossible to get it produced. It's almost impossible. Even with the huge number of people that are looking for content, the huge number of producers that are trying to produce content, getting a spec script sold is almost impossible. Producers and studios are buying content that already has a following. They're buying content that already has an audience. And they'll license a graphic novel before they'll buy an original screenplay under almost every circumstances. Getting a film or television show based on a spec screenplay to the screen can take 5 to 10 years. It's likely it'll never happen. A graphic novel gets fast-tracked if it's popular. if you check out donedealpro.com, the TV deals and film deals, and you check out what's selling, you'll see a lot of graphic novels are selling. And the reason is because producers know what they're buying and because there's an audience for it. You'll see very few sales of original screenplays, especially by newer, relatively inexperienced writers, producers, and studios. And when sales do come easily, it's become some aspect of the project is associated with a significant market. Like it's based on a book or a film or a TV series, it's about someone famous. So if you don't have that kind of edge in your screenplay, you should probably think about turning your screenplays into graphic novels because it may make them more sellable. And at the very least, you'll find a way to make some kind of money from all the work you did in creating the characters, coming up with the plot, etc. So if nothing else, creating a graphic novel turns your screenplay into something you can actually sell. It's a better investment than just having it under your bed. And the other thing is a graphic novel is a good credit. You know, filmmakers respect people with graphic novels. You got 5 or 6 graphic novels and a following, you start becoming very popular. Producers, studios, and investors like graphic novels because they can see that there's an audience that's paying for the content. They see others investing and promoting the content. If you sell it through a publisher, or if you take a graphic novel and a publisher, one of the major publishers in graphic novels, or even a smaller one, decides to publish it, it proves that it's investable. People are putting money behind it, and people think that that makes it more valid. They also see news media that highlights the content, because whenever you release a graphics novel, you're going to run press releases for it, you're going to do interviews for it. I talk about that a little bit later. That press makes the property more valuable. So there's more information about this in the workbook, and you should read through it, but producers, studios, and investors really like graphic novels for a wide variety of important reasons. If you are going to produce a graphics novel and you're going to sell it, you need to make sure that you understand your intellectual property rights. You have to make sure that you register your screenplay or the graphic novel script before you show it to anybody. Because the rule is really, if I take your work, if you send me your book and it's not copyrighted, and I go up to the Copyright Office and I register it, by default, the Copyright Office says I own it. So the first person to register the work at the Copyright Office wins. You would have to prove, if it came to a conflict, you would have to prove that you owned it. So you need to understand about registering your work at the Copyright Office and what it gives you, and you need to make sure that when you sign contracts with people or make deals with people, what rights you have, what rights they have, and how they're going to be enforced. There's more information about that. The other thing I would mention, just as you work through the workbook, there's a section in there that talks about due diligence. You need to know who you're working with. And there are ways to make sure that you're working with somebody who's reputable, who won't steal your work, if you're working with a publisher or an agent, they're actually going to do their job. If you're working with an artist, making sure that he's somebody reputable that you can trust. And also, you know, artists, if there are artists listening, you need to make sure that the people that you're working with are reputable as well, because it's very easy to run into somebody who promises the moon, who actually doesn't deliver on any of the promises that they make. So if you don't need to know more about these topics, you can always send me an email at nancy.fulton@yahoo.com. I've done a lot of work on covering this material. And now we're going to dive into some stuff we need to understand or agree on before we start actually talking about creating a graphic novel. So if you take a look at this image here on the screen, you'll see that there are the little squares that have the information in it are called panels. And this page has 3 panels. You can see that there's stuff inside a square, text, and it's usually explanatory text, like this is a location or an explanation of what someone is thinking. That's called a slug. And then there's dialogue, which is when people are talking to one another. And you need to make sure you use the right words when you're talking to an artist or when you're talking to publishers. And the reason you have to do that is that otherwise you spend most of your time not effectively communicating what needs to change. If I don't say, I need to change the top panel, then how is an artist supposed to know, I need to change the top of the picture. I need to change the part where it says lounge. Well, do you mean just the words where it says lounge or right around? Like, what are you talking about? Is it the whole panel? Is it half the panel? What are we talking?
Is it night? Is it day? Is it the morning? Are people walking? I mean, these are details. I know they're minor, but it's like I need a visual. Take a picture of, what you want, especially for the opening scene.
Right, exactly. So when you're talking about panels, make sure you're using the right nomenclature. When you're using slugs and dialogue, make sure you're using the right words. Make sure that you're creating a graphic novel that will work, or make sure your story works as a graphic novel. A lot of, you can't take War and Peace and turn it into a graphic novel and have it convey War and Peace. Horror, science fiction, fantasy, allegory, and surreal tales like superhero films, those are usually the most popular. And mostly they target people ages 17 to 25 with some significant overlap down to 13 or up to 45. There's different groups of people. You can, when you're working with the right artist and you have a real rapport with them and they understand your vision, you can get a lot done as a graphic novel, but you need to understand sort of the family of graphic novels as they exist in the world, so you don't create something that nobody likes because nobody knows what the heck it is. I really suggest that you read 20 or so recently published popular graphic novels, because you as the writer need to acquire a visual style. You need to understand when you're communicating with the artist that you're working with what you envision in terms of the style of the art, in terms of what's in the pictures. The artist is bringing all their experience to the table, but you're the writer and you're the one paying the bill, so you need to know what you want and be able to express it. And the easiest way to do that is to be able to say, look, I like this book, and this book. So the artist understands when you say, I like these 3 books, or I like these 5 images. They understand when they look at them, they can see what's the same and they can understand what you're going for. But if you just try to hand them a pile of words, somebody's wearing an aviator jacket. Well, there's 50,000 different kinds of aviator jackets. You don't know that.
You know what? You know what, Nancy? I just had an issue with that. I'm working on a children's book. It's been for 2 years now. I completed this page. He wrote the notes, what he wanted. We signed off on a sketch. I finished it, and he wanted it completely redone. He didn't want it. He wanted it, and it's like, well, you should have. You can't do that. You need to pay for a new page because you have already confirmed and signed off on the sketch. You can't say now, well, and not expect to pay nothing. It doesn't work that way. I mean, it's well over 14, 15 hours on that one page. You can't just, no.
Well, and I think particularly when they, like when I've worked in computer-aided design and animation, so I've had experience working with people that don't really think visually and don't know that they have to. And they honestly believe when, they say, well, it's morning. Okay, is it blue morning? Like, is it when you first wake up, or is it 10 o'clock in the morning? Like, what time of morning? I need details. What colors are we looking? Is it a golden morning?
Is it purple and yellow? You know? I know it's minor, but when it's completed, they'll say, no, I want a different cloud. You have to be specific sometimes, because you don't ask and confirm, it lands on you if the responsibility is on you, because if you didn't listen. But if you line up all the dots and they come back and they still don't like it, then there's an issue. Yeah,
exactly. So, and especially it starts, the other thing is it just goes so much faster when you're communicating using graphical references or using imagery as much as possible. It goes so much more quickly. And if you take a look at recently published graphic novels, you can actually see how much they vary in style. So when you're looking at graphic novels that you like and that you want your book to be like, is it color or black and white? Because black and white is cheaper. How many panels are usually on a page? Some graphic novels have only 3 panels on most pages, and some, I swear to God, they have 8 or 9. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Some have very detailed backgrounds, and some are very, like Archie comic books. There's almost nothing in the background.
Yeah.
Some have some look like photographs almost, and some are very surreal or allegorical, like kind of like Alice in Wonderland. So a lot of different options.
Yeah.
You need to think about how complex are your characters. Are they just line art? Are they like 3D renderings? Are they shaded sketches? How many characters are there? Some comic books are virtual wastelands. There's like only 1 or 2. I swear to God, you read them and you're like, there's no people that live in this town. There's just like everything, every street looks lonely. and
Right.
some are crowded to the gills. It's like Gotham City.
Right.
So how many slugs appear on the pages? Because that's a big issue.
Yeah,
You know,
and you know what? Also, Nancy, one thing I've run into is where people think a comic book or graphic novel can be done in 2-3 months, and it's just you know, and they want it rushed. And it's like you can't do that. You got to be realistic on what you want,
mm-hmm.
and then you have to be realistic on the style. If you want something so detailed like Star Wars and whatnot, it's going to take time to
Right.
something that nice.
Right. The more lines you ask them to put on the page, the more shading you're putting on the page, the more complexity you're putting into the images, the longer the images take to make. When
Yep.
you're looking at when you look at a graphic novel and it looks like photographs, that took a long time to make.
Yep.
That took years to make.
Yep.
And you may not want that for your work. You may want something much shorter.
Yeah.
Or much faster to create.
Yeah.
And actually some of the sparse ones look great. So it's more about visual style than simply about money, right? Because you can do really great work. Sometimes the stuff that's sparser is actually, there's reason why it's sparse. You might, when you get a chance, you might go check out some of these graphic novels. You can just click on them in the workbook and they'll actually show them, and you'll see how different the styles are. Like if you
the last one. The last one is the last one with the next page. With the swastika.
Mm-hmm.
It's simple but stylistic, and
right.
It's like, okay, that's kind of cool. I'd like to read that, and I'm sure it's probably a good story, you know. And I'm pretty sure it took half the time to do that. The one right above it, just right off the bat, that probably took about a year to well, if this was the only project he worked on, probably 1 year to finish that.
Right. Well, and I think when you look up at the top, like the one that says outlaw, and you see that he's standing on the corner of a building, so he's in the foreground, and he's a silhouette, and what's in front of him is very detailed. Well, that requires thinking, right? Like you have to think about, okay, how blurry do I want to make this? Like how am I going to give that sense of depth, right? So the more complexity there is in terms of 3 dimensions and in terms of atmosphere in your story, the more that's part of the story, the more complex it is for the artist. You're asking the artist to do a lot more rendering and a lot more thinking.
Shading.
Yeah. Well, and guesswork.
It's a lot.
It's a lot to think about.
Compared to the one on the bottom.
Yeah, compared to the one on the bottom, exactly. So there's guidelines in here that talk about creating your own characters and your own work. If you're gonna, one thing that's really helpful, whenever you start working with your artist, one of the first things that you're gonna do is you're gonna try to create the characters together. You're gonna create what the characters look like, because the artist has to be able to draw them on every page and in every circumstance. And so if you can find actors or actresses or people that look like the characters, that saves a huge amount of trouble, because you go, I want it to look like, John Wayne, only he wears glasses and he's got more hair. Or I want it to look like
Terminator, half robot, half human. Gotcha.
Right.
I get it.
Right, exactly. So I think that those, and I'm going to take questions at the end. If you have them, you can put them in the text messages, but I'll take questions at the end just to make it so it's a little bit easier for us to sort of stay on track. We get to the part where we can just have a longer discussion. So make a note of the question that you have right now, and I'll make sure it gets answered. So it is safe to use actors and actresses if you're not actually saying, look, this is a picture of Glenn Close. If you're not actually, you're allowed to use her likeness as depicted by an artist, particularly with changes, if you're not referring to her and saying, this is Glenn Close, right? You're depicting her, you're basically saying my character looks like this person, because people do look like people. If your characters are routinely changing clothes, or first of all, telling people what your characters wear is important. And if your character is going to be changing clothes, each time they change clothes, it's good if you can actually provide the artist with a picture of the outfit you're putting them in. And actually, you might find that if you look in catalogs, like if you look at preppy catalogs, if you're doing something about a college campus on the East Coast and you get a college catalog, and you take a picture of the students that are in the catalog, or you look at the magazines that sell to those people and you use those photographs. So it's the easiest way. You say, look, he's wearing a white shirt and a dark vest and a tie, and it's got, like, it's easier to communicate that visually than it is to sit there and try to tell somebody how to try to tell somebody, well, the collar's more pointy. You could spend your whole life explaining that.
Yeah, hands down, Nancy, reference pictures are dead on. When I get somebody describing it, for some reason, I've always got problems.
Well, it's because there's no way to describe. There's just, there's an infinite number of vests in the world.
Right.
It's like, well, which vest is it? Is it the one with the 3 buttons? I mean, how much questions and answers, how much Q&A do you want to do to get the picture drawn?
Right.
Finally, when you start, in every book you do, the location or locations are as much a character, much a part of the book as the characters. If you choose to have a very sparse background, you're saying something about the world these people live in and how they think. If you have very detailed backgrounds, you're saying something about the world these people live in. So when you have locations, that if you can find photographs or images that show those locations, if you say, well, this is set at a Scottish castle. Okay, which Scottish castle? Because there'd be a lot of them. Or this is set, in Berlin. Okay, which year?
Or Louisiana swamps.
Yeah, Louisiana swamps. Okay, wait, is that the one with the Spanish ivy? The Spanish moss draped from the one? Or is it the one where it's basically like, completely empty and it goes out to the sea? Like, what are we talking here? So if you have photographs or images that you can show your artist, everything's going to go 5,000 times more smoothly. You may decide to actually create a lookbook in order to work with people. Things go so much more efficiently that way.
Yeah.
Now, in most graphic novels, there are key props and devices that define the character. Like if you think about Harry Potter, he had his wand, right? Or he had his owl, and he had the letter that he got from Hogwarts. So all of those things are, if you look at comic books and graphic art that comes based in the Harry Potter universe, those things matter. If you look at Superman, the telephone booths you go into have a characteristic look. So when people have if there's props or key objects that are going to be a big part of the story, make sure that there's image work of that, because otherwise it's going to be catch as catch can when that finally turns up. So if you've got important props like expensive cars or whatever, make sure that you actually provide detailed images for that as well. Now, I strongly urge people. So people say, well, how do you hire a graphic artist? And my strong feeling is you look for an artist who's got the kind of work that you like. You look at their portfolios and so forth. And I suggest that you hire them for a short period of time to create 3 or 4 images for you. Now, you may end up spending a few $100s to get them to do this, but you'll learn several things. 1, you'll learn about what they're like to work with. 2, you'll learn about whether or not, when you tell them what you want them to draw and you give them pictures, whether or not they actually create what you want. And third of all, you ensure that the art that they create actually belongs to you, which is not the case if you make them do it for free. And finally, you set up a relationship with them which makes them feel safe and secure, so they're not constantly wondering, when am I actually going to get to work for you? So people always try to dive into these huge projects and they don't want to spend any extra money and they want people to do work for free. I think that's exactly the wrong way to do business. I refuse to do business that way, and anybody who knows me will tell you that I hate the free thing. I seriously hate it. And the reason is because you always end up paying more money. You always end up with people being less happy. You always have less control over your work. And when push comes to shove, it's not fair. I don't want people to make me work for free. I never work for free. It sounds crazy, but I actually don't. If people may ask me for something and I may feel like giving it, and I'll do it. But if I'm actually working for people, I'm on the clock, because I think that that's the only way to make sure that there's going to be good business out of it. Whenever I've worked for free, I've ended up unhappy, and I've never hired somebody and let them work for me for free and not ended up unhappy. So when you're converting a screenplay into a graphic novel, one of the things that's great is it's kind of almost there. The formats are very simple. So when you're creating a graphic novel, you create a script, which is very much like a screenplay script, which describes what's supposed to happen in each panel, what the characters say to each other, and what the slugs are. And so a screenplay actually looks very much like that. Now, if you look at the screen at the top, the top image shows, I'm pointing at my screen, can you see? So the top image shows a standard screenplay. Exterior, driveway, day. A car pulling a trailer rolls into the driveway of a rural house. Interior car, day. Mark Rye, the 40-something lawyer and father. So if you look below that, here's the comic book script. You see how it says panel 1.1, 2, that says basically I want to have on page 1, I want there to be one panel, and I want it to have a station wagon pulling a trailer into the driveway, and I want a dialogue button coming out of it that says 4 bedrooms, 40 acres, a barn, and a creek. If you look on the second section, it says panel 2.1, that means page 2, panel 1, first panel. The wagon parks between the tree and the 10 plank steps that lead up to the front porch of the house. 2.2, from the outside the car, we see Sandy look up at the house with concern. She's the harried 30-something mother of a brand new blended family. So when you're working with a graphic artist, before you get to this point, you've already got a picture of Mark. You work with them to create a picture of Mark and a picture of Sandy, and then you're telling them what's going to be on each page. And if there's other information like what the house looks like and so forth, you've sort of agreed on that previously. So that when you actually start, when he sees this page, he already knows what the station wagon looks like. He already knows what the house looks like. He already knows what Mark looks like. He already knows what Sandy looks like, right? He already knows these things. So when he draws the image, it's really fast because he goes, okay, I get what this is. I get where we are. He can do a sketch, you approve the sketch, and then he starts drawing, right? So but notice the relationship between the screenplay page and the comic book page. If you take, here are the basic rules of graphic novel writing. Each page of the comic book script describes one page of the comic book. So 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 is the first page. 2.1, 2.2, 2.3 is the second page. Each panel describes what's drawn and then specifies what the character says. And the more you read graphic novels, the more you'll realize why this structure makes it possible for an artist to draw what you describe. You want to make sure that and this is actually, I'm sure Anthony can go on for days about this. You want to make sure what you describe can be drawn. As Tom shoots Ted, Ted runs to the other side of the room and jumps over the hedge. Can't be drawn. That's like, stuff's moving. And it turns out artists have not yet managed to explain or to create moving images with pen and ink on a still page, right?
Right.
So if you say Tom shoots at Ted as Ted jumps over the hedge, then the artist knows, okay, Tom has a gun in his hand, he's shooting at Ted, and Ted is suspended over the hedge. That can be drawn, right?
Right.
So you have to be clear that what you're saying can actually be drawn. That when I read the words, I know exactly where everybody is in the picture at the time that I'm drawing it.
Yeah.
You need to label your character text clearly and keep it short. If you have to have a monologue, that's a problem. Like somebody has like a paragraph of text, the artist is going to go, I'll put this in, but you won't like it.
Well, not only that, if you're doing the bundle where I'm doing everything, including the text, you have to be pretty reasonable. Otherwise, you can contract somebody else to do the text, and I'll just focus on the artwork.
Because does it take a long time to actually get the text right?
Yeah.
Is it just because you have to do the editing as well as do all the lettering?
I pretty much hope the editing's already done on their part. I just copy and paste, and lay it out. But it's time consuming. It's time consuming.
Right, and it has to be legible. And when it's too long, it turns into questions like, "Where do you really want this much text? It's too long. I'll have to change it."
And not only that, it interferes with the artwork.
Right, I have to figure out where to put the text.
Yeah.
If it's taking up half the page.
Mm-hmm.
So more than one panel and less than 6 panels on a page is the general rule. If one of the things you are going to rely on your artist for a lot is layout. So if you tell him what the panels are, you can say, I want three panels, one on top of the other. But he may come back to you and say, look, this is a boring picture because nothing's happening, and this is a boring picture and nothing's happening, and this picture is where all the action happens. So let's make this one big and these ones small.
Yeah.
Also, he may decide not to lay them out so they're separate. He may decide to lay them out so they're overlapping, or he may actually take out the boundaries entirely. So It depends on the style of your book. But the layout is kind of one of the things that you're hiring the artist to do.
Yeah.
So I talk about tools to use. I happen to use Celtics. I have an old version, which you can actually get. There's the links that you can download that will actually let you create storybook scripts. Or you can actually just write them in Word if you like. You can literally write page 1, panel 1, caption, etc. Or you can use Celtics, and it will actually create the pages like I showed you previously, where there's lines between them, between the pages. If you're hiring an artist, you can find them lots of different places. It's hard to find ones that are really good. DeviantArt, Guru, Upwork, Freelance, Craigslist, comic book collaborators, ArtStation. There's a whole bunch of different places to look for them. If you have lots and lots of money, you can look for people that have recently worked on a major graphic novel for a major publisher, but you'll cost a lot of money to hire them away because they're getting paid, $500 or $600 per page or more, and they're also usually getting a pretty good royalty. So you're lucky if you can get a good graphic artist to work with you, and especially one that you can work with repeatedly, because they tend to be in really high demand, and the more successful they get, that's another good reason to get a good relationship with them. Just because a graphic artist works with you to do your first novel doesn't mean he's going to do your second. I mentioned sort of pricing, and it's ballpark pricing. I say $300 per page. It really depends on the pages and how much work people have to do, but that's sort of it's people sometimes say, well, I only want to pay $50 per page. Well, one, I think that's probably illegal, and two, it probably violates labor laws. And second of all, you're not going to get somebody who's good.
Unless you're doing volume, unless you're doing 200 pages or 100 pages, you know what I mean? Then the price changes. But if you're doing something that's 8, 10 pages, 22 pages, I mean, yeah, that's realistic right there.
It's in the ballpark, right? If you get down to just part of your negotiation with the artist is what the work is. Black and white pages maybe one thing, color images may be another. Sparse images like that Mouse House one, that's going to be one price. If you're doing, the new Batman, and you want to look like Gotham City, that's going to be another one, because it has everything to do with how long the time is.
Yeah.
Let's see. If you, and I talk about here sort of other terms, as I say, I never do free, and I never do bottom dollar stuff. And I don't even, if I'm working with somebody, I want to pay them right from the start, even if they're just doing stuff on spec. Collaborative agreements where you don't pay people, you need to have an agreement with people, and you need to understand how that's going to work and how that's going to impact your intellectual property. If an artist draws something and you haven't written an agreement who owns the copyright, the artist owns the copyright. You understand? Just because you tell somebody something and just because you're paying them does not mean you own the copyright. It does not mean that. The artist has to actually sign something that says, yes, this is a work for hire deal and the copyright is transferring to you. If you don't have that, you don't own the work, and they can sue you if you publish it. So you need to make sure that if you're collaborating with somebody, especially if you're not paying them, you need to make sure that you have an agreement with them. And you may need to specify, if you're going to do a revenue split deal, you need to make sure that you specify how the revenues are going to be split, how they're going to get paid into some bank account, and how they're going to get out of that bank account to the people that deserve the money, because that can turn into a huge hassle. It can turn into a lawsuit pretty quickly. And if you have questions about that, I would tend to use a collection account management account to take all the money and split it up, so it's easy for the artist and easy for me. Finally, you may want to include in the contract that you can, if desired, hire a second artist to create the book, and you're free to publish this work without compensating the first artist. If you're working on a deal where you have said you're going to collaborate with people, and then you don't have something in the contract that lets you part company, then they effectively own the work from then on, because you made a collaboration deal, right? You said, we're going to collaborate on this. We're going to create a joint work. That means they own it, and that means they can publish it. So if you're going to do a collaboration, you and the artist both need to put into the contract how you're going to part company if things go badly.
And please, yeah, and please, I've run into this so many times, and the client just, they kind of flip out. And once they sign my contract, it's like, don't, I mean, get it up front, because it's going to happen at the end. They're going to, this is going to pop up, and they're going to say, well, you never told me. Like, no, I told you the first time we talked, you know, here's a contract. Oh, okay.
Right.
Please get it all out.
The publisher really will not publish it if they don't have that information. They just won't. If you were to take it to a publisher, they're just going to say, well, who drew this? Are you the artist?
Right.
No. And they're going to look at you and say, the artist owns that page. He drew every line.
Yep. If you don't have the artist with you, you submit that book, good luck. It's not going to happen.
Right. They're just going to walk away. So you need to make sure, even if it's your story, that's not going to matter. So there's more information about working with artists and so forth. When you're working with when you want to sell your work to a publisher, what you're going to work your art. Sorry. When you want to sell to a graphic novel publisher, usually what happens is they have their own graphic artists they want to work with in-house. That's how they maintain a uniform style. So what you do is you'll work with an artist to create images of the characters and images of the key locations. That information is what you'll submit to the publisher along with your graphic novel script. And so here are 3 images from one of the projects that we sent over to the agent that I work with. And if you take a look at it, you'll see it gives you a sense of the book. It shows the characters in black and white. And by looking at it, you have a sense of the world that these people live in, and you have a sense of the characters themselves.
Yeah.
You're going to submit the script, the images, and a 1-page query letter to an agent or to a manager, and a literary agent, a book agent. And then you'll ask them, can you represent me? And if they say yes, they'll take that package and they'll send it out to people who are interested in producing graphic novels. Alternatively, you can approach publishers directly. Usually you just send them a query letter and some sample artwork. And when they say they're interested, that's when you would submit your your written script for the graphic novel, along with all the rest of your artwork and so forth. And if you go to Writer's Market, you can find a Writer's Digest, which is made by Writer's Market. You can find a whole bunch of graphic novel publishers, or you can just go and take a look on Amazon and you can find the publishers there, or you can also go to the library and say you need a list of graphic novel publishers, and the librarian will actually help you find them. If you want to produce a graphic novel yourself, you can choose to run a Kickstarter campaign. If you can sell 400 copies of a graphic novel, like an original edition graphic novel, for $50 each, you'll earn enough money, like $20,000, which is enough to pay the artist and publish the book and promote it. Or you can sell 100 copies at 25. Sorry, I made a mistake. You can sell 1,000 copies at 25. I shall fix that and update the book, and you'll make 25,000. So you can sort of get a sense for if you can sort of get into that ballpark, but with pre-sales through a Kickstarter campaign. That's one way to fund your project. Many people produce graphic novels, and this is actually how they fund them. If you choose to actually publish, your graphic novel, and you just want to get a copy as quickly as possible, you can upload a PDF file that contains all of the pages that your artist has created in one PDF file. You can go to lulu.com, just upload it, and they'll print as many graphic novels as you want. It works best with black and white. It can be kind of expensive for color. If you want to get if you want to produce your graphic novel and have it go out to bookstores and actually get onto Amazon, you can use Ingram Spark to publish it. They have a set of tools that make it relatively easy, can tell you how much it's going to cost, and the pricing is good enough that you can actually make a profit by selling your graphic novel for $20 or which is sort of in the ballpark for what they sell for. If you want to publish a digital version of your graphic novel, which a lot of people do these days, you can use the Kindle Comic Creator, and that's actually just click the link. And then if you want to promote your book, you can start doing interviews for it, and you can also send press releases out through sendmer.com. So I put links in so you can learn more about that. It's very straightforward. It's not difficult to produce a graphic novel. It takes time to do well, and it takes time to make. You have to treat it like the work of art and the product that it is. But it's a very feasible thing to do, and people have made a lot of money doing it. Some people make a really good living by making graphic novels. It's interesting to note that Joss Whedon, so Joss Whedon, we all know that he did Buffy. We all know that he did a whole bunch of shows. He's been very successful on television. When you get a moment, go on Amazon and look up Joss Whedon graphic novels, and you'll see he has created dozens and dozens and dozens of graphic novels. He's a very successful person. Neil Gaiman, very successful writer. He creates a lot of graphic novels, and they sell for a lot of money. So it is a way to make a living that a lot of times people underestimate. And then, cool. So you can contact me at Nancy at nancyfultonmeetups.com if you have questions. I'm always up for answering them. So now we've gone through that quickly. I'm going to go ahead and stop share. And then I'd like to spend a few minutes talking with Anthony about his experiences working with writers and sort of what he hopes is going to happen when somebody reaches out to him to talk about doing a graphic novel. So do you want to start for a few minutes about how you want to be approached when people have a graphic novel they want to work with you on?
Yeah. I mean, they can usually call me up and give me a brief outline of the story, what they have prepared already. Most of the time when I ask them, is the concept already done?
Mm-hmm.
Or do they at least have photographs of characters of who's ever playing it? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I can use as a visual point of reference when I'm doing the graphic novel.
Right.
If they have all that, then we get into, okay, so what's your financial situation?
Mm-hmm.
Most people don't have a bank account like Disney. So I understand that. So if they're able to say, well, let's do this, I can give you X amount per month, as long as on this date and this date, that is deposited. Otherwise, prior to I even give the artwork, that payment has to be already taken care of. And then I release the artwork, and then we go to the next month. And it's just like, it's a pretty good structure. And I hold that pretty religiously to the client, because if for some reason like a week late, 2 weeks late, then it's a mess. You know, if we're up front and like, look, if you want, we're going to do a 22-page comic book. Okay, so I'm going to do this this is how many I could do this week. So by Monday or by Friday, I need this X amount into my bank account, so we continue this flow.
Right. Do you mostly use PayPal, or do you use like how do you handle those transactions usually?
I hate PayPal because they take out so many fees, but most people have PayPal, so we work it out where they can.
What do you prefer that they use? Like, do you have a preference for?
Cash App. It's a new app. Chase Quick Pay, Zelle.
Apple. Do you ever use Apple Pay or that?
No, that's a new one for me. There's another Get Cash, I think it's called. There's these other two that I'm just recently using, and it's automatic. There's no fees. I think if anything, it's $1 compared to PayPal, where they take out almost $10, $15. You know, depending on the amount.
Right.
But Cash App, I mean, it's instantly. It's like literally.
I think it does an ACH transaction, which is different from like PayPal. I guess they can't. I think they're supposed to be doing instantaneous now, but it's a different. I think the problem with PayPal is they do have a lot of fees, and at some point, you either have to charge more for that, or somebody either have to charge more for it, or you have to eat that cost, which is kind of a drag.
And the last thing, the reason why I don't use PayPal is because I had an argument with the client after he didn't want to pay for the revisions. So he made a complaint to PayPal, and all the pages that I did, I basically did for free. He got a refund because PayPal went with the client instead of me.
And they always do that. The other thing, it's not always good for the client either, because if PayPal gets mad at you when you're using the platform, they can actually seize up your account, and they can actually withdraw money out of your account without your permission. Like people understand, PayPal's not a bank; it's not regulated like a bank, so it can do kind of some crazy stuff.
Yeah.
So when people approach you they can send you an email as well, right?
Yeah. I prefer email because phone calls take a little bit longer and all this.
Well, you need artwork. So
Yeah.
at some point.
Email's great. Perfect.
So when people send you an email, should they send along a description of the project along with the whole script and with some sample images or artwork, or do you want them just to start with a basic letter first, kind of like a query letter?
Just a general idea, and some sample images of what these characters look like, so I can understand the details, how much detail it's going to take. And if I like it, then the next step we get on the phone and kind of sort out the details.
Right, and do you take at some point you have to read the script before you know you want to do it?
Absolutely, yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Do you have a if somebody wants to reduce their cost, do you make suggestions for ways to do that? Like, well, maybe you have a lot of pages here, maybe fewer pages, or do you suggest doing it in black and white only, or do you suggest, like, how do you help people? Do you help people figure out the process of reducing the costs or ways to make it less expensive, or is that something you just sort of let them figure out?
No, I usually try to help them out. Like, I'm working 2 jobs and this and that, and I don't have, but I want to make this book, and I can see that their heart's into it and they like my work, and it's a cool story. I'll usually like work out something with them, like, hey, you can get, since you've got all these characters, let's break it up to, you get 3 characters at this price, and then per page with pencils, inking, coloring, and the text. As long as you do 3 pages, we'll do it at this price. So I'm open and flexible with that. I'm not like, no, it's got to be this, it's got to be that. I'm open per project basis.
Is it the case that when people are sending you sample images and so forth, does it matter if it's a photograph or it's artwork that's come from some other place? In other words, can the art just come from anything?
Yeah, yeah. As long as I get a general idea, as long as I have an idea what they're talking about, because sometimes it could be a psychedelic picture, and the girl lives in a dream, and the world is psychedelic. I have no idea what they want. They have to show me a picture. Oh, I got it.
Right, because psychedelic also comes in a bunch of different shapes and sizes as well, right?
Right.
Acid trips are not all the same. When people send you they say, okay, we're going to draw this page. They send you the information. Do you create a sketch for them first to say, this is the layout that I have planned?
Yes.
In that layout process, you actually say, so people can look at it and go, okay, then this character is going to be this big in this frame, and this one's going to be over here. So if people don't like the size or the framing or something being on one side or another, or they want that, if they make changes at that sketch point, is that okay, or do they have to?
No, if there's any revisions, it's right at that sketch, at the process right there. Once they get the sketch, that way they can say, hey, is Billy this big, and and they can really adjust and tweak. And usually the sketch is almost 80%. It's not all the way detailed. It's just a general idea. I wish I had one. It's just a general idea. And if it's like, hey, if all the bells and whistles are there, then I'm going to go ahead and ink it, and I'm going to show you one more time before I go ahead and color it and all of that. So they're like, oh, okay, just so we're right on the page.
Right. But if you're already through the coloring, by the time you're at the coloring stage, you don't want to have the geometry moving around.
No.
Because it's too time consuming. You have to literally take apart. You have to redo the image, basically.
Pretty much, yeah.
Cool. When you're creating preliminary character or environment sketches, what helps when people need to if I give you a picture of Glenn Close and I say, hey, this is what I want, do I have to actually tell you, okay, the face of her shape is the same, and her hair is black instead of how do I just do I write on the screenplay or something, or sorry, do I write on the thing what's different about the image from my character? Because I think a lot of times people don't understand that you don't have to find somebody that's exactly right. You can say it looks like this person, but it has black hair and has glasses.
Yeah.
Right? So they can write that on the image, or they can write it on the.
Yeah, as long as I have a general idea, it's like, hey, it's Johnny Depp, and it's like this, but he's a hitman. You know, and he's got this black suit. He wears red gloves. I got it. It's plain and simple. You know, but sometimes I run into something like I worked on a novel. He's gonna pitch it, and it was this guy in a swamp, but he's a ghoul, but he wasn't bloody enough. He doesn't show enough teeth and bones. Is like, yeah, you got to show me pictures, dude, because I'm.
Yeah. How ghoulish? Because like ghouls come in a lot of shapes and sizes.
Right.
I'm feeling about ghouls.
Right. You know, he's like the teeth. I want the teeth. And it's like, I need this. You know,
Yeah.
I mean,
because there's just a lot of variation, right?
Yeah.
So, when you're working with people, what really slows things down? Is it like we've talked about the fact that they make you do revision after revision because they're trying to communicate something in text that you really have to see to understand. Yeah. Is there anything else that they do which makes it so like it's really hard to work with them? Like even though they like your art, it's just not like working with them is a total hassle?
Yeah. Like for instance, and we're gonna go back to the sketch. You know, once they give me a paragraph about this character and I go ahead and produce a sketch and they approve it, and then I come back and finish it, and they want something else, then we have a problem. Somewhere we miss somewhere. You know what I mean? And it's rarely happens. I just had one client that was, it kind of blew me away because it just like after I finished, it's like, this is exactly what you told me. Where did we miss this?
Yeah. You know, did you not have a sketch, and so did you not know that?
Yeah, it's like the sketch was there. You know what I mean? You saw it. So if there was any time to revise it, right there was the point. Right there.
So do you ever have trouble with people like that you send them work, they're in a hurry, right? So you send them work, but then they don't come back to you very quickly with edits. In other words, they're in a hurry, but on the other hand, they're not very responsive when it comes to emails or telephone calls or getting data back to you.
Yeah, and I try to bring that up at front when I speak to whether it's a director or an author or whatever. I usually tell them up front, once I finish the sketch, I really need you like in 24 hours to prove this so I can move on because I've got other projects. Because if you don't get back with me, I'm going to lose you right now. Okay?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Because if you don't get back with me in 24 hours, Toyota may call me and I'm doing a commercial for the next 2 days.
Right. Exactly. So, and I get, so the turnaround time is important. Cool. Let's see. I'm going to just take a quick look at the questions, just as a couple people that I want to make sure that we get to, and then I have a couple more questions about your work doing storyboards and how that feeds into your work as a graphic novel.
Absolutely.
So, so Thomas says, and I think it's true, providing really good photographic images is much preferable to simply verbal descriptions, especially if the descriptions are long. That's correct, right?
Yes, I agree 100%. Yeah.
And it's also important to make sure the artist does have some latitude, as he points out, because sometimes they have ideas you don't have. So that's one of the things, if you're doing a sketch for somebody and you have ideas, you're going to put it into the sketch. Like in terms of layout, in terms of shape, or make this panel larger, this one smaller.
Yeah.
So
if they're okay, like, hey, this is the foundation, but you can go ahead and add your touch to it. You can tweak it, but this is the foundation. Okay, yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
So Thomas is also asking, is there a boilerplate legal agreement for working with an artist, or do you have to hire an entertainment lawyer? There are certainly contracts around for work for hire agreements for illustrators. I personally, I have an attorney, so I, generally speaking, would choose to work with them to do an agreement. And also, but it also depends on, the work for hire agreements are fairly standard. And as Anthony has mentioned, he actually has an agreement. So when you work with him, he'll actually say, if you're not handing him a contract, he's handing you a contract. So, and it has work for hire language in it, correct?
And you know what? Yeah. And not only that, it avoids problems down the road. It's very clear about my revisions, about my payments, about, it's very clear. And usually at the end of the contract, like if there's any questions,
Right.
let's get on the phone, we can adjust, but it's pretty clear.
Right. And if there's an attorney, if you need to work with an attorney, then there are also some that you can actually hire relatively inexpensively to review a contract on your behalf. So if you take Anthony's contract and then you submit it, you can submit it to an attorney, and a lot of times you can buy half an hour of their time in order to take a look at it. Or like I said, if you want, you can present the contract to Anthony, and he can review it and decide whether or not he wants to sign it. And I'm sure that's been over the years, because he's done so much work, he's had more than enough time to explore the different options of contracts there are.
Yeah, I've seen a lot.
I've seen a lot of
Here's the bad music in the background, and all night they practice right across the street.
Exactly. So I want to take just a sort of a few minutes to say, thank you, Thomas. So I want to, so you actually are a storyboard artist, and you work actually for producers on a regular basis, advertising producers, as well as film and television producers. Do you want to talk mention some of the people that you've worked with to create storyboards for projects?
I've worked with Ethan Manikis, who was the co-director for Machete, Anthony Ferrante from Sharknado, Pretty Little Liars for Stephen Kafer for Pirates of the Caribbean, the widow from Blow, Amanda, I forgot her last name, which was throwing some concept art, and Fillmore from Nickelodeon, who's a host from the early 90s shows. So those are pretty powerful, not powerful, I'm just saying those are really well-known people in the industry, and you have to be really good, because if once they call you, you have to really meet that, because otherwise you won't get that phone call again. And usually it could be out of the blues. I may get a call tonight, and they may I want 25 storyboards in one day, and it's it's a major director. You have to do it, because he may never call you again. And it's demanding, and you have to be fast. You have to be really fast. And it's really, go ahead.
I was going to say, so when you mentioned the fact that you get a phone, and also you mentioned working with Toyota, so you work with advertising companies on advertising campaigns as well. So when you're drawing the storyboards, one of the reasons they're working with you is because you understand what the camera sees. In other words, if somebody says this is a wide angle, like what you draw looks a lot like what they end up shooting with the lenses that they actually have. So
and with that, Nancy, it's because they really don't have time to explain it and hold your hand to say this is a shot. It's like, you got to understand my language. If you don't, that's the last time I'm going to work with you. So it's like really right. I mean, you're on the spot. And I usually normally, depending on the time I get the job, I'll do my research. I'll spend a good hour researching commercials or action or battle scenes. So when I'm with that director, I'm ready to do that, I'm already fluid in what he wants.
In his language, right?
Yeah.
So is it the case, like sometimes you work on set, right? They'll be doing effect shots, and they'll bring you in and they'll say, and you'll talk with the director, and you'll draw a picture of what it is that actually has to be shot, and you hand that to the DP and to all those other folks, and they actually make that shot happen.
Yeah.
So in a way, you're an interpreter for the director.
Exactly. Yeah. Because if I don't do that and they go ahead and do that, you're costing thousands of dollars wasted.
Right. He doesn't have time to shoot this thing 4 or 5 times to try to get, like that thing we were talking about a minute ago. Tommy shoots at Johnny as Johnny's jumping over the head. He wants to depict exactly that, and he wants to make sure they catch the moment, that they highlight the moment where the guy is suspended over the hedge.
Yeah.
And so you were the one who has to say, okay, this is the key frame. This guy is over the hedge and he's lit up.
Right.
Because that's like the key moment for this thing.
Yeah.
So, cool.
Yeah.
When you and so when you're drawing on set, you do have to work really fast. So is it the case that you might do a storyboard for 3 or 4 scenes in a day?
Yeah. It's been a while since I've worked on set. The last time I worked on set was with the music video for MTV. And that was a 2-day process, and I did well over 45 boards in one day. Yeah, it was from 7 a.m. to about 8 o'clock at night. But with that in mind, they were really simple. The road, the car, the freeway pass. I mean, they weren't very detailed. There wasn't no shading. It was very fast. most of my work has been remotely, and it's actually worked out really nice.
Mm-hmm.
If there was any questions with the director, we usually get on the phone and clarify that. And the storyboards come out much better because I'm able to take my time. But sometimes you get those rush jobs, and you just got to do it. You just got to make them look nice.
I think it makes total sense that thing about working. I too write remotely on a regular basis as well, and what I notice is I do better. I write more quickly, and things go better for everybody if I have my stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
I need my computer. I need my desk.
Yeah.
I need my storage.
And ironically, Nancy, a lot of people are like, "Why do you need me too?" And I need.
No, you don't.
No, you don't. No, you don't. I've worked on feature films remotely.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a problem. I'm a really good listener. If I wasn't, I would not be in business.
Right. I mean, and that's another reason. But I'm exactly the same way. I was like, I can't. If I have to take my computer to your location to write for you, that's going to be a problem. I don't mind. Like, if I sometimes I meet with people just because I like them, but generally speaking, it's not the case that I'm going to sit and have somebody over my shoulder while I'm writing. It's too confusing.
Yeah, I usually tell them when they say that I need you on set, and I usually tell them it's $850.
So I'm up for it if you got money, and you have to cover my travel costs.
Yeah, I'm up for it. But other than that, I can work remotely. You won't pay that. It's like
it'll be fine. Okay, so I guess how I wanted to talk. Last question I really wanted to ask you. Two questions. First one is, how many years have you actually been working as a professional illustrator and storyboard artist? How long have you been working as an artist?
Since 1987.
Wow, that's cool.
Professionally since 2002.
2002, very cool.
Yeah.
Have you? And actually, and it's interesting. You're actually working with producers. That's pretty cool. That's a hard gig to get.
Yeah.
And the other question is, how can people reach you? So is it the case that they should we're going to take a couple of questions before we end up, but I want to take a moment now. How should people reach out to you? You mentioned calling you, or would you rather just have them contact you by email? What works best?
Email's fine. I mean, it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
If we need to get to the next step, then the phone call's okay. But they can find me on Instagram, Anthony_Sturmas. It's not on private, so they can just send me a message there or add me or follow me.
If they want to just send you a normal email, can they use the
Gmail? Yeah, the mrsturmas@gmail.com.
Cool. And I'll go ahead and I'll write it down on the bottom of the screen.
Yeah.
And when they reach out to you, they should just start out by sort of writing what amounts to a query letter saying, this is the project I'm working on. I'm thinking about producing a comic book, so that's only 22 pages. I'm thinking
by the way, with that note, and just be honest. I mean, I got a lot of people, it's just like, just be honest. Tell me where you're at so we can avoid that gray area. Just be black and white and just say, look, this is what I'm working with. I want to get this done. Where can we meet halfway? And I'm really cool about it.
So in other words, you don't mind if they actually start out at the beginning saying, look, I only have X amount of money to spend on the whole book. Are you interested in taking a look at the project? Yeah,
and then that way we can avoid the shoe leather. With that note, I think they're still doing it, but Image Comics right now, and I think I mentioned this to you, they're wanting an author. You can get whatever story, 4 pages plus the cover. So if you can find an artist, you can submit that to Image Comics.
Mm-hmm.
And they're reviewing comic books. So that's something you can look at also.
I think that's a really good idea. So if somebody has a project and they're interested in taking it, they can talk to you about all the different, when you're talking to them and they say, this is the style I like, and you can go, you know what? All the pieces you've shown me are from Image. So maybe that's who you should actually approach when you want to, if we do a few pages, maybe that's who you should be approaching. Or in other words, you understand the comic book market with some sense of who the different kinds of artists are and so forth.
Yeah.
So all right, cool. Let me go ahead and just check to see. Somebody asked, what's the typical split between artists and creators when you're doing graphic novels? There's not really a typical split between artists and writers on graphic novels. Sometimes people decide to do quote unquote 50-50. Sometimes they decide to make it so that the artist gets paid more because they're putting more time into it, and the writer can take their work elsewhere, right? So if I'm a writer and I've written a screenplay, And I know that, and I want to work with a graphic artist to turn it into a novel. I might decide to give them the lion's share of that revenue from the graphic novel, because I have the movie revenues and the other novel revenues that I could generate money from. I have other ways to make money, whereas the graphic artist only has the graphic novel to make money from. Let's see. Cool. So if you have any other questions you want to ask, feel free to send an email at nancy.fulton@yahoo.com after this event is over. And if I can't answer it, I'll be happy to contact Anthony, and he can respond. And I will be turning this video, this recording, into a video within the next 48 hours, and I'll be posting it and making it available to you along with the workbook that you already have. So you should be able to get answers to all of your questions going forward. I really do look forward to hearing from you if you've got trouble. One of there's a few things that set my events apart, and one is that I routinely create workbooks to go with my events, and the second one is that I provide support after it's over. So you can always email me a question about any event you've attended. If you like my work, you might want to become a subscriber. You can because you'll pay like $40 for 3 months or $90 for a year, and those are the current prices. But if you do that, then you'll end up being able to go to almost every event, and you'll have more than 100 workbooks, videos, and other things you can use for reference purposes. It's not a hard sell, but sometimes I have people that go to like 10 or 20 events, and I'm like, you're paying a lot of money. I don't mind because it's good for me, but I feel you should know.
And by the way, Nancy, by another year, the graphic novel will be done. So we'll
really?
talk to that. Yeah.
I cannot wait. I mean, I think it's coming out really good.
Yeah, it's gonna be pretty cool.
And actually, some of the artwork from the graphic novel is actually in the workbook. And so I want to mention that I don't get a kickback or whenever I do an event with somebody, I don't get a kickback or any back end from them. Every time I do an event, it's because I like the person. Often it's because I've worked with them personally. So that's why I like them. I think everybody, whenever they're doing a deal, has to do their own due diligence, make sure that the person that I like is someone that they actually like as well. But I want to be clear that whenever I do an event, my objective is what's important to me is that the person that I'm speaking to accurately represents the process. You know, if I'm talking to a DP, I want them to represent the process of being a DP, what it's like to work with them, how it's possible to work with them and save money. I want them to talk about how, when they should be brought into the project, you know, how much money they need in order to be involved in the planning process for a project. If I'm working with a line producer, I want them to talk about how much it costs to make a budget. So what's important to me is that the people I'm interviewing provide factual information that is not just related to them, but is related to anybody else that you're likely to work with. And I personally very much like working with Anthony. He very much suits me. We see things similarly, and we seem to have a good rapport when it comes to when he draws something, it comes out better. It comes out like what I expected, only better. And I think that's mostly what most of us are looking for when we're working with artists. I think a good graphic artist combination is an unbeatable thing, actually. It's a very powerful thing. Yeah. So if you have any questions, once again, send me an email at nancy.fulton@yahoo.com. You can reach Anthony at mrsturmas@gmail.com. Mm-hmm. And we both look forward to your questions. And I thank you very much for taking the time to meet tonight. In 48 hours, this video will be available. And I hope you guys have an excellent evening. All right.
Hey, and by the way, the Wi-Fi didn't drop, so that's awesome.
Yeah, I know. The technology. It's like sometimes it's like 10 cups, right? A 10 cup and string would work better.
Right.
But thank you very much. You were amazing. You're a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful speaker. Thank you very much.
Likewise. Thank you so much for the information on that book. That was really top notch.
You're welcome. Take care. Talk to you later.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.